you guys released Jake Moody.
Yep.
I don't know if that definitively means Drew Stevens is the kicker, but what about Drew Stevens has impressed you this camp?
Yeah, and I thought this was a good competition all the way back from the spring when we had here. We kicked just about every day from the spring and like 2 out of 3 days in these blocks for training camp. And both guys, I thought, have had, productive days. But I thought Drew established himself. Thought he's kicking it, pure and clean. And so it is important for him to have the next 2 games where he gets all the kicks, all the moments. And so it was just a good competition. I thought, earned it. And so we're moving forward.
That was a bit surprising. I mean, when he doinked in the 29-yarder on Friday night, it certainly seemed more than possible that Stevens would win the job. He was leading in the actual competition, but I guess I'm a bit surprised that it happened so soon. But good riddance, Jake Moody. Welcome to the show, Drew Stevens. By the way, I would say that I feel very strongly that this isn't for just the rest of camp. Like, they're not bringing in any kind of competition. They're planning on him being the kicker for Washington in 2026. Of course, subject to change. Let's hope he doesn't get hurt. Let's hope he doesn't miss a string of kicks. Good morning, everybody. Max is here. Brian is here. We've got 2 guests on the show. Jordan Dajani from CBS Sports will join the show at 11 a.m. to go around the league, and he's going to tell us that there is a team planning to play its starters more in the final 2 preseason games than any team has done in recent memory. And no, it's not our team. Not that we know of. At 12 noon, we'll go down to Baton Rouge and talk with Mike Scarborough. Mike's covered LSU football for 30-plus years. So Jake Moody is out. Drew Stevens is in. Stevens, if he makes it to the regular season, and that's what they're planning on, and kicks in a regular season game. I saw Nikki Javala tweet out some of this yesterday. He will be the 12th kicker since 2020 to kick for the team in the regular season, 12th in 6 seasons, and the 8th in just the last 2 years. Here's the list, by the way. You ready? Since 2020, the 12 kickers, including Stevens: Hopkins, 2020, then Brian Johnson, Chris Blewett, Joey Sly, Cade York, Greg Joseph, Zane Gonzalez, Austin Seibert, Matthew Wright, Jake Moody, Matt Gay, and then Stevens would be the 12th. The last 2 years, we've seen Moody, Gay, Wright, Seibert, Gonzalez, Joseph, York, and now Stevens. I went back and looked at some of the kickers that have been here since 2020. The one that you might say they should have stuck with is Joey Sly. Joey Sly kicked a 61-yarder for us, a franchise record for us. And then he went to New England and booted a 63-yarder in 2024. He was in Tennessee last year, and the other night in the Titans preseason win over the 49ers in Santa Clara, Joey Sly went 4 for 4 on field goals. He made a 53, 55, and 58-yarder. Joey Sly is one of those guys that when you cross midfield, you got a shot. That would be the one, maybe. I mean, Zane Gonzalez obviously had a memorable kick in Tampa, a doinked kick that moved Washington into the divisional round against the Lions. And it was very likely Jake Moody's doinked kick on Friday night that cost him an opportunity to continue to compete. By the way, in mentioning Joey Sly and the 53, 55, and 58-yarder that he made in a preseason game the other night, and some of the very long kicks that he's made since leaving here, and he made one here, and he made a couple more here. Remember the Joey Sly moment. The Joey Sly game was the 2022 Monday night game in Philadelphia. He was 4 for 4. He kicked a 58-yarder right before half. He kicked a 55-yarder in the fourth quarter to give Washington a 5-point lead. And the Skins pulled off an absolute stunner that night in Philadelphia as an 11-point underdog to win the game 32-21. That was the first of 3 straight wins that got them to 7-5, if you recall, in 2022, heading into that December stretch where they played the Giants twice in 3 games. They tied the first one. They lost the second one. Then they lost to the Browns, and old Ron Rivera didn't know that he could be eliminated from the postseason later that day. By the way, that Philadelphia game was also the game in which Taylor Heineke baited Brandon Graham on the 3rd and forever play into a late hit that basically sealed the game for Washington. Anyway, lots of kickers we've had over the years. And by the way, it goes on before 2020. Drew Stevens has a big leg. He's got big game experience in college, kicking outdoors, kicking in bad weather, on grass. He's been the more impressive kicker throughout camp. As I mentioned on yesterday's show, he made his only field goal and his only PAT, but the PAT before the made one, he actually pushed wide right, but the whistle blew the play dead. So it was a non-play. Maybe the whistle threw him off. Who knows? But anyway, there you go. Big news from Ashburn yesterday. Washington has decided on its kicker for 2026, Drew Stevens. And by the way, I'm just seeing a tweet from Nikki Javala. Drew Stevens, in his first practice as the starting kicker, just doinked in a 60-yarder, bounced off the crossbar. There you go. All right. They are practicing as we speak. We'll have some sound from out there. The first of 2 padded practices, and then we'll see what happens Saturday in Detroit. I have some thoughts on that I will get to here in the first hour of the show. This from Joel that I wanted to read. Joel wrote, I guess you hadn't heard, Kevin. Twitter's already gone through the All-22 and definitively determined after a couple of preseason series that Sonny Styles is a bust. I heard about that, Joel. Yes, Twitter and amateur film breakdowns. It's been an interesting combination the last few years. Just to set the record straight, Joel, Sonny Styles didn't play multiple series on Friday night. He played 1. It was a 14-play series on defense, but he played in just 1 series. Yeah, Max informed me yesterday on the show that many of the Twitter film breakdown guys were already very, very concerned, deeply concerned, that Styles could be less than advertised. Might be just a bit too early for that prediction, don't you think? Maybe not. Maybe it's me. By the way, I liked Sonny Styles where Washington selected, but Max, you know, and everybody listening knows if you were listening during draft time, I loved Reuben Bain at that spot. I thought Reuben Bain was the best defensive player in college football last year. I thought he was the second best player in all of college football after Fernando Mendoza. That's who I would have picked, but the short arms apparently were a major issue. Although the opposite conversation is taking place in Tampa about Bain versus what the conversation is with some of the people out there about Styles after the other night. The talk about Bain is over the top for the opposite reason. Sam Monson, 33rd team, used to be with PFF. We've had Sam on the show many times before. Bain had 3 sacks in the joint practice last week with the Jets. They basically said he disrupted the entire Jet offense during the joint practice. And Monson tweeted after the performance in which another Bucks beat reporter said, quote, Bain was unblockable, already the makings of a dominant pass rusher, closed quote. Monson tweeted, if Reuben Bain is just as good in the NFL as he was in college, a lot of teams are really going to kick themselves for passing on him because his arms were pretty short. Yeah, that's the reason. I mean, Bain would have been a top 3 or 4 pick in the draft had his arms not measured. What was it, like 30 inches or something like that? Something too short for the NFL people to fall in love with. Tampa got him. We'll see what happens with him. The Bucs actually didn't even play him in their preseason game. They sat him with the rest of their starters. Styles isn't a bust after one series. Bain isn't a Hall of Famer in mid-August. It's just ridiculous to talk in those terms this time of year. I know that these guys that break down films, some of them are truly expert, but if they are literally labeling him as not as advertised after one series, my recommendation would be to not follow them, not listen to what they have to say anymore after one series. That is not really a good feel for what the NFL is this time of year. I got this from Adam about the Jaden Daniels LSU situation. This is a nothing burger, Kevin. It's only a big deal because people like you keep talking about it. Most people want to talk just about football. I have found that this time of year, just about football doesn't always work, but we're doing both, Adam. It's not that hard to walk and chew gum at the same time. We talk about more than one thing during a 3-hour show every day. As far as the nothing burger goes, for us, meaning Washington fans, for now, yes, I agree with you. For us, for now, it's a nothing burger. It was a distraction, obviously, and it was a distraction, I'm sure, for Jaden. But I think he'll deal with it and is dealing with it. But here's where it doesn't become and could be more than a nothing burger. And that is if the lesson isn't learned by the family, the PR team, the mother. You know, those responsible for last week. It's one of the all-time self-inflicted PR blunders in this kind of a business that we have seen. And it wasn't him. It was not him. He didn't do it. But they've got to learn the lesson from this. They damaged his reputation in the short term, and they created a huge distraction. They literally made him a punching bag on social media for 4 or 5 days. He's going to get over it, I'm sure. We're already over it. I'm ready for him to play football. LSU doesn't have that luxury of seeing him play football, which is why it may linger with them for a while. You know, they don't get to see him go out and erase all of this nonsense from the last week playing football in their jersey. He's a professional football player. But look, what we all learned is that his team, his mother, they're way too involved, period. You know, if nothing's learned about this and about their overreaching involvement, then another big mistake and distraction could be just around the corner. And that's not something he needs. It's not something the team needs. From Hal, another DC media created story. Can't believe people fall for this stuff. Grow up, Hal. Seriously. Let's act like we're a real sports town and not some pom-pom waving college town in the Midwest. I mean, seriously. Yeah, people like you are insufferable to read. From Maurice, I'm so disappointed in the Jaden controversy. As you said, this didn't need to happen. I don't even like scrolling on Twitter. It's all over the threads, too. It's ridiculous. It's embarrassing, and I'm trying to avoid it until it blows over. JD5 better ball out. I think he's going to ball out. And, again, he gets to go play football, and we get to go watch him play football. This isn't, lingering for us once he hits the field and starts playing. Whatever this was will be distant once he starts playing and balling out. I think he will. The key is the group around him. They have to have learned that they're not the show. They're not the star. He is. He's a professional. He's an adult. And he's going to have to rein those people in make sure that something like this doesn't happen again. I did want to get to something that Dan Quinn said yesterday. Let me first read this from Rhett. Rhett writes, Kevin, with Mariota injured, there's no reason to risk Jaden in the preseason. The Eagles game is the only game that matters. Yeah, that's true. But in terms of the Eagles game being the only game that matters, I want Jaden to play in the preseason. Dan Quinn was asked on Sunday. I think Nikki asked the question.
He was asked at the end of the presser today.
Oh,
if Jaden
well, I've not heard that. So what did he say today?
You've seen with Jaden Daniels, would you be comfortable if he plays 0 preseason snaps?
Yes, I'd be comfortable like him and other veterans that have played to go. But yeah, we haven't decided in terms of like, will we or won't we? We had a joint last week. He got a lot of reps. He'll get a lot today and tomorrow going against our defense. So I'll have a better sense for where everybody is before we make any of those decisions. But he's thrown like an incredible training camp. His accuracy, his command of it, a new system. You wouldn't feel like that for him. But I've been like certainly impressed by what I've seen so far by him.
Judging by that answer, I think
he's
we're
not
leaning.
Playing.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. He answered the question Sunday. It was more of a question about will Mariota's injury impact the decision-making on Jaden playing the final 2 games? And he actually said the injury won't affect it. And then he kept talking. And by the end of it, I'm like, yeah, Jaden's not going to play against Detroit or Baltimore. These padded practices today, tomorrow, the joint practice, at least the one that's scheduled with Baltimore next week. Play that again. I want to hear that one more time, please.
You've seen with Jaden Daniels, would you be comfortable if he plays 0 preseason snaps?
Yes, I'd be comfortable like him and other veterans that have played to go. But yeah, we haven't decided in terms of like, will we or won't we? We had a joint last week. He got a lot of reps. He'll get a lot today and tomorrow going against our defense. So I'll have a better sense for where everybody is before we make any of those decisions. But he's thrown like an incredible training camp. His accuracy, his command of it, a new system. You wouldn't feel like that for him. But I've been like certainly impressed by what I've seen so far by him.
All right. So he's not going to play against Detroit and he's not going to play against Baltimore. That's my guess. Maybe they'll change their mind. I don't like that. I mean, I don't know anything compared to what they know. And they have, you got to trust the people that are managing this. And with that said, I want him to play. I want him to play a series or 2. I want him to play football. Like, he hasn't played football since early December of last year. And by the way, that was not a great memory the last time he was on the field. He's got a new offensive coordinator. He's got a new center. He's got a new receiver, primary receiver, a new tight end. He's got a new back in the backfield. There's just a lot. A lot of other starting quarterbacks have played. I mean, veteran starting quarterbacks that probably are having really good camps, like Jaden is having. Josh Allen played. Joe Burrow played over the weekend. Jordan Love played over the weekend. So if he, doesn't play in the preseason, basically he'll have these padded practices and 2 joint practices against the Dolphins and the Ravens as his preseason work. I don't know. I can't predict what'll happen when they get to Philadelphia. I just think that with all of these players, not just him, all of these new players with 2 new coordinators, wouldn't you want just a dry run through? Wouldn't you want a bit of a rehearsal in a game environment for a series or 2? I guess they don't feel like they need it. I was hoping that the script would be flipped on Saturday in Detroit, and that instead of basically 90% of the expected starters sitting, 90% of the expected starters would play a series or 2. I'd like to see it. Again, they know a hell of a lot more than I do, but Jaden played in the preseason last year. He played in the preseason the year before. Why not this Saturday against the Lions? I mean, why not even in the finale against Baltimore? I mean, I understand that game will come 2 days after the joint practice, and that may be a reason for that, okay? But this Lions game isn't coming after a joint practice. I mean, there's just a long time between these preseason games and the regular season opener. There's 16 days between the Baltimore preseason game and the opener. That's far more than there used to be when there was a 4-game preseason. There used to be about 11 or 12 days. Now it's like 16 days before the opener, 22 days between the Detroit game and the opener. Somebody called in yesterday and I was thinking about it and I thought it was a really good point. And I was thinking about it and I made a note of it to talk more about it today. And it was just about, I know this is absurd and this sort of feeds into the narrative that, in Washington, you can talk about third stringers in the summer and people are interested. But this is the quarterback position and this is Sam Hartman. And I forget who called in with sort of this thought of why him. I have thought about it, and I want to talk about that when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. I forget who called in and said yesterday, what is Sam Hartman doing on this team? And I said, it's a good point. Like with Marcus Mariota out, do they have the best possible answer for these preseason games in terms of throwing the football to guys like Trey Burks and Van Jefferson and Luke McCaffrey and Antonio Williams and all the guys that are fighting for roster spots? It's a fair question because I think we've seen enough to know he's not a starting quarterback in the NFL. He's not a backup. He's not an NFL quarterback, period. Is he on the team because he's close with Jaden? I don't know.
Yes.
Ask Regina Jackson. Ask Jaden's mom. We knew last year. Let's not forget. Sam Hartman could have played those final few games if they wanted to give him some experience in the NFL instead of starting 80-year-old Josh Johnson at quarterback down the stretch. Could have done that, but they didn't. Doesn't that kind of tell you everything you need to know? Or am I missing the fact that maybe he was injured? I don't think he was.
He had shoulder surgery in the offseason prior to last season, so there wasn't a ton of zip on the ball. You can see a little bit more of it coming into this year, but I still
loved
think
him at Notre Dame.
Listen, Callie
Loved him at
McManus has
Notre
done
Dame.
great this preseason. I'm intrigued by him.
Yeah, I mean, certainly not going to judge a couple of decent throws, and then at the same time, a couple of big sacks.
Yeah.
Playing in the third and fourth quarter of the first preseason game against guys who basically aren't going to be in the NFL in 3 weeks. Sam Hartman, by the way, was really, really good at Wake because at Wake Forest, he was truly an awesome dual threat quarterback. Wake does this thing, and they've been doing this thing for a while, where the zone read, the mesh, where you stick it in the gut of the running back, they read it out at such a long stretch of time that literally like the quarterback and the running back are moving towards the line of scrimmage together for what seems like an eternity. It's really interesting to watch. Some of the academies do it as well. And Hartman was really, really good at that. What were his stats as a rusher? He had 364 yards rushing in 2021, 4,228 yards passing. 11 rushing touchdowns in 2021 with Wake. And then in Notre Dame, it wasn't nearly as much of him being dual threat. I mean, he had 117 carries in 2021, 102 carries in 2022 at Wake Forest. But he was a really solid dual threat college quarterback. He does not appear to be an NFL caliber quarterback. I mean, he just doesn't. And whether you like the kid from Rutgers or not more, I'd like to see Jaden throwing to some of these receivers in these preseason games. But if you're not going to go there, Josh Johnson was available to bring back. He's in Cincinnati as the third string quarterback behind Burrow and Flacco. Jeff Driscoll, didn't his name come up in the calls yesterday? I think that the same caller said, why not Jeff Driscoll? Or maybe Ben did. Ben may have said that. And I think he's available. He's played NFL games. I don't know. Maybe I'm being too hard on Sam Hartman, but I hope he's not there only because there's a really good relationship with the starting quarterback. And look, for all we know, Hartman's phenomenal in the quarterback room. He must be. You can't be a guy that literally looks like you can't play in the NFL, but be on the roster and not be great in the meeting room. You know? I actually thought he had a couple of decent plays the other night, but he missed a couple of throws. It's not his thing to be, a thrower, a consistent thrower of the football at the NFL level. Back to Jaden playing, because I think actually I'm curious as to what you guys think. Maybe my reaction to what Quinn said a little while ago. Why don't you play it again, Max, for those that are just tuning in? He was asked about Jaden playing in these preseason games. Here's what he said.
You've seen with Jaden Daniels, would you be comfortable if he plays 0 preseason snaps?
Yes, I'd be comfortable with like him and other veterans that have played to go, but yeah, we haven't decided in terms of like will we or won't we. We had a joint last week. He got a lot of reps. He'll get a lot today and tomorrow going against our defense, so I'll have a better sense for where everybody is before we make any of those decisions. But he's thrown like an incredible training camp. His accuracy, his command of it, a new system. You wouldn't feel like that for him. But I've been like certainly impressed by what I've seen so far by him.
So, I mean, I think it sounds like he's not going to play. He's said immediately he would be comfortable with him and other veterans not playing. I mean, Jaden is a veteran, but really he's got one season under his belt, his rookie season. He barely played last year. I understand the fear. I understand the risk. But so do other teams, and they're trying to get their starting quarterback and their starting offenses and defenses into a little bit of rhythm. Look, this is one of those things that when we talk about these things, we're probably in over our skis. With that said, if they come out and lay an egg against Philadelphia on September 13th and they get pummeled by the Eagles and none of their starters played in the preseason, we're going to point back to it. You know, they didn't have a great first game in Tampa 2 years ago, but to be fair, I mean, it was his first game. They played well enough. Openers are weird, but they didn't play well in week 2 at Green Bay on a short turnaround. I mean, they don't have that short turnaround this year. Maybe playing a little bit more would have helped with the short turnaround going into Green Bay after the opener last year. You don't have that this year. But it does open him up to criticism if they look like they're not ready to play in the opener. And, you know, what they would probably say is playing a series or two wouldn't have made a difference. And that's probably true. It would have made a difference in the reaction, and they shouldn't really care about the reaction. At the same time, if he were to play the starters and a big-time starter went down, God forbid it was Jaden in one of these preseason games, he'd be massively open to criticism from the other side that said, what are you doing? But it wouldn't be unique to play the starting quarterback. You know, the Sean McVay trend of basically not playing any starters in the preseason, it's easier for him because of the track record. Like, they've won a Super Bowl. They've been a great team. He also has a 38-year-old starting quarterback in Matt Stafford, who really doesn't need preseason work. I personally would love to see, with, you know, uniforms on against an opponent in a stadium with fans, with a scoreboard, with a clock, with a play clock, I'd love to see 2 series. And by the way, if you're going to do it, I don't just want to see the ball getting handed off 3 times to keep him safe. Let him throw it around a little bit. Let him get into rhythm throwing the football around a little bit. Do some quick game stuff. 301-230-0980. 301-230-0980. Are you okay if Jaden Daniels doesn't play at all in the preseason? By the way, it goes beyond Jaden Daniels for me. I think all of these starters with 2 new coordinators, it just seems like they could benefit from playing. It seems like at the very least, the downside is nothing. Well, the downside's not nothing. The downside, of course, is risk of injury. But they could get injured in the first quarter of the season opener. I would like to see the starters play against the Lions personally. What do you think? 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. It certainly sounds like if he continues to practice well this week in these 2 padded practices today and tomorrow, that he and probably many of the other starters are not going to play against Detroit on Saturday. That game, by the way, is a 12 noon kick on Saturday, if you didn't know. 301-230-0980. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. from a friend of mine. Kevin, watching Hartman at Wake highlights right now. Is that even legal? Isn't the center downfield illegally? Yeah, it looks illegal what Wake did. It was a very slow, methodical mesh read, zone read, play action, keeper offense. But remember, in the college game, the rule is linemen can go 3 yards down the field on RPOs as long as the ball's out of the quarterback's hands. In the NFL, it's just 1 yard. It's a massive difference between college and pro football in terms of the illegal man downfield penalty. It's 1 yard in the NFL, 3 yards in college. So a lot of those meshes are also RPOs. And yeah, there are receivers wide open. Wake Forest with Sam Hartman during those years was literally unstoppable offensively. They were so good on offense. They couldn't stop anybody. I think they played Army. I'd have to look this up. I remember a game that ended 70-57, I think it was. That was a real score. It was against, I think it was against Army. Did I say Army or did I say Navy? I think it was Army. Wake Forest, 2023, 2022, maybe. What was the year 2021, probably. 70-56. Good memory. I was a little bit off on the score. 70-56 was the final score. Wake Forest at Army. All right. Wake that year, by the way, lost. They went 9-3, won a bowl game. In the 70-56 game against Army, Sam Hartman threw for 458 yards and 5 touchdowns. He was really, really good as a college quarterback, as a dual threat zone read, kind of a RPO kind of a quarterback. Man, they had some ridiculous. 2 weeks after winning 70-56, they lost to North Carolina 58-55. He had 78 yards rushing in that loss and 398 throwing for a total of 7 touchdowns, 5 throwing and 2 running. All right, question, not about Sam Hartman. Are you okay if Jaden Daniels, and I'll just say the starters, both sides of the ball, are you okay if they don't play in the preseason? I don't love it. I wish they would play football because it's been a long time and you got a lot of new players and you got 2 new coordinators. How about just getting, are they going to be okay with Allegretti and Jaden in the first time they're snapping, under center or shotgun, doesn't matter, in a game being the Philadelphia game? I don't know. Max, what do you think? Do you want Jaden to play? You want the starters to play, yes or no?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially like with the installation of a new offense, I want to see what it kind of looks like. I know Blau's
we won't see what it looks like.
Blau's not going to show anything. But I also want to see Jaden out there just looking the part and going back to what he was in 24, at least just looking good. That's all I want to see. But I understand the other side of it with how last year went injury-wise, and especially with Marcus getting hurt in the first preseason game. You don't want anything bad to happen to Jaden. So I get the protecting element of it, but at the same time, you got to get some game reps on the field, at least in my eyes.
So last year, if you recall, Jaden Daniels played 1 series against Cincinnati. That series was a 4-play, 74-yard touchdown drive.
Ran it in himself.
There was a reverse to Debo for 19 yards. Chris Rodriguez ripped off a 40-yard run. Then Rodriguez went for 1 yard. And then Jaden on a drop back on 2nd and 9 scrambled and ran for a touchdown. And remember, Cincinnati's defenders basically could have hit him and chose not to in the end zone. And they weren't thrilled that he took off and ran in that spot in traffic up the middle of the field, not towards the sideline, not sliding. Maybe they just don't trust him in a preseason game. Seriously, it could come down to that. The more that I think about it, it's like, we'd like to get a series or 2, but when he's out there, he's competing at a level that we're concerned with, considering the circumstance. I've said with respect to Jaden, the number one, I think, thing you've got to see in terms of growth is he can't treat 1st and 10 in the first quarter like it's 4th and 5 down 6 in the fourth quarter. You can't take on a defense in a preseason game on a 14-yard touchdown run. All right, let's start with Stan in Sterling. Stan, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Just to expound on it, so I believe that they should definitely play their starters at least a series or two. You have two new coaches basically on the offensive and defensive side. So, if we still had Kingsbury and Witt, and we're in a third year of a system, I could see why they wouldn't play familiarity. They don't really need the reps. It's familiar. But since you have two new coaches, you got to get some reps in, I think. At least play a series, in my opinion. You don't want to not do that and then look rusty to start out in the opener. So especially with some tough opponents coming up, you need some of the reps in practice. So.
Yeah. By the way, in looking up last preseason, what I discovered is, yes, he played, but he did not throw one pass because he only was in there for 4 snaps against Cincinnati. He didn't play the first preseason game against New England, and he didn't play the last preseason game against Baltimore. And maybe they're like, well, what's the point if we're going to put him in for one series? And, and we'd be concerned that under pressure, he might take off. And maybe they're concerned about pressure in particular without game planning for the pressure. Maybe that's part of it too. They don't game plan. They're not scheming up protections. They could if they wanted to, but because you're not game planning and you're not planning on helping Brandon Coleman or helping, against an Aiden Hutchinson if he plays. I don't know if he is or isn't for Detroit. Maybe they're like, yeah, the 2 padded practices and the Ravens, joint practice with yellow jerseys on is fine for us. Thank you, Stan. Let's go to Mark in Glen Echo, my old stomping grounds, or certainly near my old stomping grounds. Mark, go ahead.
I agree with you, Kevin. I think he should play. You just said something about, and that kind of triggered me a little bit, not far as negatively, but just, as far as Jaden with these competitive juices. I mean, that's the only comparison that I would have with him and RG3. Do Dan Quinn trust him enough to stay within, himself and not just, how these athletes are. They get competitive and they might do a little something, tweak something, but injuries are part of the game. I would love to see him play, but if he's mentally locked in and they think he's mentally locked in based on these next 2 practices, padded practices, then, hey, I got to roll with it. I'll give him a pass, but I'll be watching.
Yeah, look, I mean, we're stretching beyond our capabilities here in trying to give them direction on playing players in the preseason. Where we're not stretching is understanding what the reaction will be if they don't play them in the preseason and then they go out and play poorly in the opener. They shouldn't care about that at all. Shouldn't bother them at all. I'm just saying that there will be a lot of criticism from many corners if nobody plays in the preseason and they don't appear ready to start the regular season. Let's go to Peter in Wilmington. Peter, go ahead.
Good morning, Kevin. Listen, I'm not happy about the quarterback situation, the backup quarterback situation. Mariota didn't play that well last year. Sam Hartman's not that good. Yeah, he played okay. But what I'm saying, he's hurt. If I want him to play, it'd be nice. If Jaden gets hurt in this game or any game in the beginning of the year, and we have no backup quarterback other than Mariota, which I really don't trust him. If they lose 7 games in a row, Dan Quinn will be on his way out mid-season because the fans will go crazy. This is a bad situation that they got themselves in. They really don't have – they have a backup, but he's hurt, and he didn't play that well, in my opinion, last year.
Well, Marcus Mariota is a top – we looked this up. I mean, I thought he would be top 5, but he was like 11th or 12th. Marcus Mariota is a solid veteran NFL quarterback who plays similarly to the starter. And look, he wasn't great last year, but he gave them a chance in a lot of games. He absolutely gave him a chance in a lot of games last year.
How many games did he win last year?
Well, that's beside the point, isn't it? He didn't have, like Jaden, when Jaden played the few games, there wasn't a whole hell of a lot around him. But, he played well in that Denver game. He was excellent in that Denver game that they almost pulled off a big upset. He played well.
That was a good game.
There were a couple games he was okay in. What'd you say?
That was a one good game. But I'm telling you, this is a disaster waiting to happen if they don't straighten this out, because they have no real backup now. Only with Mariota, and he's hurt. And how long is he going to be around?
Well, they say he's apparently going to be ready to back up Jaden in the opener. So
we'll see. Thanks, Kevin.
Yep.
Great show.
Yeah, thanks,
always.
Peter. All right, Mark in Largo. Mark in Largo has the stage that he so desires on a twice or three times a week basis. Go ahead.
You're funny. Oh boy, here we go with this crap. I think he should play, but I can understand why Dan doesn't want him to play. And I don't think it's more about Jaden. I think it's more about Allegretti. And what I don't understand, Kevin, is why we haven't gone out and got a center.
Well, because there aren't any right now to go out and get.
Well, you can't get I know there's a guy who's available that somebody in the front office used to play with Summer. I forgot it. He played with the Lions. Played with the Lions. Not Decker. Not Decker.
Oh yeah, no.
Another guy that played.
Oh yeah, I thought you were talking about Decker because he's
not
been hurt
Decker.
too.
It's another guy that plays with that plays center who's available. He played with the Lions last year. And I know he's 6'6".
Yeah, Graham Glasgow.
Is because
Graham Glasgow. I don't know anything about him.
But you got to get depth. And see, I think what Dan is concerned is not so much about Jaden. Well, you could say Jaden. It's the center position. And here's the other thing. I think the first series last week, that offensive line got beat up again. And is there anyone else that could play left guard outside of Chris Paul? I saw a rating of him yesterday, which was not good.
A rating for what? A preseason game for a series?
No. I'm talking about last year. He was like 40.
He had some good games.
We had a worse offensive line in 25 than we did in 24. It's truly amazing. When Brandon Coleman didn't play, and I'm not talking about Larry Thompson, but I mean, the coaching staff made a big tiff of replacing Coleman with Paul, which turned out actually not to be a good idea.
That's debatable. I know that some advanced numbers didn't necessarily evaluate Chris Paul that well, but there were plenty of people that thought that he was a road grader at times in the run game and was better than Coleman was early in the season. I mean, they obviously felt like when Coleman got injured that Paul was more than good enough. At the same time, they were willing to let Paul go into free agency before realizing he didn't get a deal, and they brought him back, and now he's got to start because Coleman's got to start for Tunsil. All right. Those of you who I didn't get to, apologize. We've got a guest coming up. Jordan Dajani from CBS Sports will jump on with us, and Jordan's going to tell us about a team that is thinking about playing its starters over these final two preseason games more than any team's done it in years. That's next. So while it appears as if Dan Quinn is heading towards not playing Jaden Daniels or many of the so-called veteran starters in the preseason the rest of the way, there is one team that is planning on playing its starters over the final 2 preseason games more than any team's done it in recent memory. Jordan Dajani knows who that team is. He's going to tell us here momentarily, but we welcome on Jordan at Jordan Dajani on X. He's been an NFL writer and reporter and columnist for NFL CBS Sports for a while. I love reading him. I actually, before you answer that question, I wanted to just get your initial thoughts. We haven't talked, I don't think, since maybe before the draft. What are your thoughts about Washington and where they fit in within the NFC East heading into the upcoming season?
Kevin, my man, what's going on? It's good to be back on the show with you. I got a lot of thoughts about Washington. You know, I think the last time I talked to you, they just promoted David Blau to offensive coordinator. So I'm kind of interested to see what this offense is going to look like. You know, whether that's more under center, 12 personnel motion, pre-snap window dressing, setting up these bootlegs and play action. But I also want to see some elements that maybe Jaden would want in this system, whether that's some Kingsbury callbacks like up-tempo series or read option. I heard that collaboration's kind of been the buzzword up in Ashburn, and that's important, but you also have to establish an identity to find ways to be an offense. And I'm curious what that's going to look like. And the other part about Washington is I don't want to ignore the fact that they finished dead last in total defense for the second time over the last 3 years. So they've made a lot of additions on that side of the ball, whether that's Odafe Owe, Chase on coming off the edge. I have questions about the secondary. And I think my major question is just, can this Washington Commanders defense be a unit that supports a division champion or maybe even a Super Bowl sleeper? And then, of course, we can talk about Jaden Daniels, the star quarterback. He needs to remain healthy for that team to reach its ceiling. So I think that the division is fascinating to break down. We can do that in a second. But I think that the Commanders are definitely a sleeper team in the NFC.
Okay, so real quickly, I mean, you nailed it with Jaden. The issue is he's got to play more than, 7 games, or in the case of him last year, he played 4 games start to finish. 4. That they go nowhere without him playing the significant majority of the games. With that understood, back to the defense. It was a horrendous defense, Jordan. You're 100% right. I mean, I considered it as a lifelong fan of a half century plus. I considered it to be the worst defense that I had ever seen Washington have. And that's not they've had some bad ones, recently. That was the worst. And by the way, the defense suffered injuries as well, but it was just horrendous. So what is your gut about the 10 or 11 new players and new coordinator that they brought in about what it's going to look like?
To be honest with you, I'm just not exactly filled with optimism. Like, I think Odafe always a fun player. Is he going to be a true starting edge in this league? We'll find out. Same with Chason. I really like your linebacking room. Like, there's reasons to be excited about Sonny Styles, Leo Chenal, Frankie Louvu. But I think the secondary is where I have my main issues. Like Trey Amos is going to be a starter for you guys. I think he's relatively an unknown and still working through some health stuff. Amik Robertson comes over from a Lions secondary that was disappointing. Akello Witherspoon retires. Mikey Sainristil is a fun competitor, but he's no Champ Bailey. So I just kind of wonder what this pass defense is going to look like against some of these high-powered attacks that are going to face twice a year, such as the Dallas Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles.
I mean, it's a total mystery. And the fact that you're leaning in that direction, it's not a crazy answer at all because we just don't know. I think the one safe bet is it can't be worse than it was last year. Like the idea that they'd add like 10 new bodies, 8 or 9 of which are going to be significant contributors and or starters. I just can't imagine it could be worse, but anything's possible. Let's talk about the rest of the division. What's it been like in Philadelphia with the Mannion conversion and working with Jalen Hurts? What's this offense going to look like in Philly?
Yeah, I think this is a major storyline in the NFL. We know that the Philadelphia Eagles have an elite defense. But the reason they're so impossible to nail down in terms of expectations for 2026 is that everyone needs to understand Jalen Hurts is learning an entirely new offense, which resembles nothing he's run before with this new guy, Sean Mannion, who was a backup quarterback just a couple years ago. Gone are the days of freestyling in Philly. This is going to be a modern West Coast system that prioritizes under center ball and wide zone runs with Saquon Barkley. And the other part about this offense and this passing attack is that you have to be able to attack the middle of the field. And that's something that Jalen Hurts has really, really struggled to do over the course of his career. So I feel like we're almost at a crossroads with Jalen Hurts, to steal a term I saw from ESPN earlier this offseason, because either he's going to prove that he is legitimately a top 10 quarterback in today's game, or I think the potential is there where he falls off a cliff, because this offense is going to be very different from anything he's run before.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, he's going to be under center a lot more, and we'll see if he's comfortable turning his back to the defense on play action. Yeah, I agree. The interesting thing, though, about Jalen Hurts, Jordan, is that in their biggest games, when they needed him to be more aggressive, he actually has delivered. I mean, the 2 Super Bowl games against the Chiefs, he was arguably the best player in the game they lost. He was the MVP in the other game. Of course, the defense really led the way. Even last year, there was a game late in the season. They had to have it against the Chargers. They didn't get it, but he actually was taking big risks and throwing the ball over the middle. It's almost like he only does it if he feels like the team can't win playing conservatively.
Yep. You're 100% right. You know what we call that? We call that a gamer. Jalen Hurts is absolutely a gamer, and he's super athletic, too, to his credit. I think he's one of the most athletic quarterbacks in the NFL, and he's just an absolute demon when it comes to moving the sticks and rushing the ball, escaping the pocket. But it's confusing, right? We don't know why Jalen Hurts struggles in some of the spots he does. Like, what I've been able to identify is that he really struggles when it comes to operating against zone coverage, going through a progression. When the defense starts building momentum and they start putting him kind of behind the stakes where he has to face 2nd and long, 3rd and long, Jalen Hurts is kind of unable to convert. And I don't understand why that happens in some spots. And then in other spots, such as the Super Bowl, he's absolutely electric. And that is where it's going to really fall on the shoulders of Sean Mannion. I mean, not only is he implementing a new offense, but there have to be different elements where he actually tailors it around his quarterback to make the most important player feel comfortable. So that's going to be a big ask of the new OC.
Let's go to Dallas, where, the question is defense. Did they do enough defensively to improve enough to be a legitimate contender?
The Cowboys have missed back-to-back postseasons after 3 straight playoff appearances, and I'm sorry to do this to you, Kevin, but I think that changes this year thanks to future Defensive Rookie of the Year, Caleb Downs. The Cowboys' offense, as we know, they ranked 2nd in the NFL last year. They were 2nd in passing yards, top 10 in rushing offense. I think they were top 10 in points per game. But as you mentioned, it was the embarrassing defense that let them down, allowing an NFL-high 30.1 points per game. I thought that when they acquired Quinnen Williams from the New York Jets, you saw the kind of impact he can make on a defensive front, but he couldn't do it by himself. So you look at the additions they made this offseason with Rashawn Gary, D. Winters, Kobe Durant, Caleb Downs, Malachi Lawrence. I'm really excited and optimistic about those additions. And I think that there's some other players they already have in place you should be aware of, like DeMarvion Overshown, the linebacker. I think is poised to take a huge step forward. How about ECU standout Siobhan Revel Jr., the long, lengthy cornerback on the back end? He was a borderline first-round talent before he tore his ACL his last year in college. He's over a full year removed from that now. He's going to play a role on this defense. So I'm kind of buying a lot of stock in the Dallas Cowboys, similar to I am with the Cincinnati Bengals, not to the level of the Bengals in terms of being a Super Bowl contender, but the Cowboys are going to be a feisty team in this division if the defense takes a step forward and the offense can keep up the production we witnessed in 2025.
Is Christian Parker their new defensive coordinator? He's a Vic Fangio, I'm assuming, disciple since he's been in Philadelphia for a few years. Is that what we're going to see from Dallas? A lot of too high, a lot of letting their front 4 win without a lot of additional pressure. Is that the style that we're going to see in Dallas, a Vic Fangio style defense?
If I had to guess, yes. Like, we're going to see a reliance on the front 4 to generate pressure and put some some pressure on the shoulders of the secondary members as well. The thing is, Christian Parker's 34 years old and he's never been in this seat before, so it's kind of tough to speculate what this defense is going to look like. You have to imagine that he's going to put his own spin on it. But if I had to guess, that's exactly what I'm thinking. I think that the linebackers are going to be called upon to be cleanup members at the second level. I think the front four is going to generate pressure, and we're going to see some members of the secondary really have to stand out. And that's why the addition of Caleb Downs is so interesting to me, because, you know, you're looking at the Cowboys' first initial depth chart. They have this position called, I think it was DB, and that doesn't stand for defensive back. I think it stands for dynamic back. And I think Caleb Downs is going to be utilized as a versatile chess piece in this new system. And that's important for a defense that relies on its front four to generate pressure.
Talking to Jordan Dejani of CBS Sports, what's the Giants situation with Jackson Dart? Back into the blue tent, took a big shot. We played the sound that he thought that it was a little bit, unnecessary for him to go to the blue tent the other day. Do they have a quarterback? Yes or no?
I'm leaning towards no. You know, it's funny that Jackson Dart was the third rookie quarterback to ever throw 10 touchdowns and rush for 8 touchdowns, joining Cam Newton and Josh Allen. But as a passer operating out of a system, I thought he left a lot to be desired. And that's the case with a lot of rookie quarterbacks. But I've kind of always questioned if he can be efficient and play smart. He's obviously athletic, but the blue medical tent is about to start charging him rent. And, we can talk about some of the additions New York made on both sides of the ball, from Isaiah Likely to Arvell Reese. But I truly look at this team and say that their ceiling is very much defined by the quarterback and this weird wide receivers room that kind of looks boom or bust to me, with an on-the-mend Malik Neighbors, Malachi Fields, Darius Slayton, OBJ. With Jackson Dart specifically, like, as a prospect, I wasn't always the biggest fan of him. I'm not usually a fan of these Lane Kiffin quarterbacks because I don't think they run anything that resembles what an NFL offense is. But Jackson Dart was better than I thought he was going to be as a rookie quarterback. But again, I thought it was mostly him relying on his athleticism. As a pure passer operating out of a system, I didn't see too much. And that's what John Harbaugh's going to have to work with here in year 2.
I mean, the roster, I'm with you on Jackson Dart. I thought he was a bit of a Lane Kiffin creation. I wasn't a huge fan. Last year, like you said, basically he was paying rent, at the blue tent, already been in it in one preseason game. But I like their roster. It's just that in this league, you got to have the quarterback. And I question it like you did, but like you do. But do you like their roster overall, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Cam Scatterbo is a really fun running back. I think the defense is still good despite losing Dexter Lawrence. DJ Reader at nose tackle is going to be fun. Brian Burns is an underrated pass rusher. Tremaine Edmonds, I think, is an underrated inside backer. Members of the secondary, too. Like, Paulson Adebo hasn't been a Pro Bowler by any means, but that's a legitimate starting cornerback. Javon Holland, Greg Newsome, Drew Phillips in the slot. So, I think the Giants have the roster to support a quarterback on the rise. But again, that's exactly why I said it the way I said it. I think that the Giants 2026 is going to be defined by what the quarterback does and what he is.
All right. So it sounds to me like you're leaning Cowboys win the division. Is that accurate?
It is. I'm surprising myself even to say it, but that's kind of where I landed at this point. We know that the Philadelphia Eagles are certainly going to be feisty, but with all these questions around this new look offense, it's hard for me to kind of stamp my approval on that unit right now.
All right. Tell everybody, the coach and the team, that is planning on playing starters at a level over these final 2 preseason games that would be the most we've seen in recent NFL vintage during this time of year.
I'm so glad you brought this up, because I think this is one of the most underrated stories in the NFL right now, when it's not even being discussed as it should be in its respective market, which I'm trying to change. But Tennessee Titans head coach Robert Saleh told reporters last Friday that he's going to increase the amount of snaps for starters each week in the preseason. I can't recall seeing something like this before. The Titans played their starters 3 series this past week against the 49ers, which was 21 plays. And if I had to guess, it's close to the most reps starters across the board got for any team. And now they're going to increase that to 25 to 30 plays this week, and then over 30 plays in week 3 when we're on the cusp of the regular season. So I'm working with our research department to get hard data about starters and preseason snaps and percentages. As you can imagine, this isn't the most well-tracked thing in the world. But when I saw Saleh's quote, I immediately thought the Titans are about to do something no other team is doing and no other team has done in maybe a decade or so.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about increasing to 25 to 30 plays in this next game and over 30 plays in the third preseason game, which, by the way, I'll look at their schedule, but usually there's a shorter turnaround between week 2 and week 3 in the preseason, you're talking about potentially more than a half of football.
They've already played a half, basically. They played past the 8-minute mark of the second quarter in week 1, and obviously they're going to be playing even more football. Listen, Kevin, I think that starters should definitely play in the preseason, but what Robert Saleh is doing is bonkers, borderline reckless. I wanted to call the NFL equivalent of the police when I saw his quote.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm looking at their schedule, by the way. They do go Sunday to Saturday, not like a Sunday to Thursday kind of a deal, which sometimes you get in that final preseason game. Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know if we credit Sean McVay for the, evaporation of starters playing in the preseason or not. But the bottom line is these games were insufferable to watch to begin with. Now it's the worst product in sports, an NFL preseason game, I think. But more importantly for the teams, are they doing it the right way? I said we were talking about this in the first hour, Jordan, and I think in many ways, this is beyond, a fan. We can say what we want and we can judge them based on their performance in week 1 if they don't play anybody, but they know better. I think they do. I'm surprised that Jaden Daniels isn't going to play at all. He's got a new offensive coordinator, a new center, a new receiver in Diggs, a new tight end in a Okonkwo. It just seems like they'd want to get some sort of dress rehearsal in before the Eagles on September 13th.
Yeah, I believe NFL teams need to play their starters in the preseason at some point, right? Like over 3 games, I think they need to play what equates to a quarter at least, like call it 3 to 4 drives. If you're Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay, maybe you can operate differently. But to your point, when we're talking about a quarterback in a brand new offense like a Jalen Hurts or a Jaden Daniels, I think it's important for him to see live bullets. I think it's important to get that live action when it comes to operating in that new offense. And maybe Washington, like with Jaden Daniels, are they kind of scared he can't protect himself? Like, is he just too much of a gamer going to go out there and put his health at risk? Because obviously that's of the paramount concern when it comes to Washington. But, I agree. I think that the Commanders absolutely should put Jaden Daniels under center, give him some new looks in this offense. What is it going to look like? Establish some chemistry with his new center and some of his new playmakers too.
Yeah, to answer your question, I think that is a distinct possibility. He played 4 snaps, 1 drive last preseason against the Bengals, didn't attempt a pass. On his only drop back, he took off, scrambled 14 yards for a touchdown, where the Bengals defenders basically were hands off. They could have leveled him. They could have taken a shot. And I do think that I think it also goes hand in hand with, there's no game planning. So it's not like if Aiden Hutchinson's in the game, they've got a game plan to double him or chip him. There's probably a lot of that, involved in it as well. I don't know. I look at what Mike LaFleur did the other night in Vegas with the Cardinals, giving Jeremiah Love all that work, and it resulted in a high ankle sprain. Did you think he was nuts to do that?
So I thought he got more touches than he probably should have had. I agree with that. But at the same time, him playing into the second quarter, I think it was not nuts to me, especially when we're talking about the first preseason game of the year. Like, this isn't preseason week 3 when we're on the verge of the regular season.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Jeremiah Love
it's 30-plus days, until the regular season.
Yeah, that would have been different. You know what I mean?
I think that's an interesting situation, by the way. They drafted a guy where they had already signed Tyler Algier, who is really good and a starter for a lot of teams. They have James Conner in that backfield. They have, Jordan, the lowest over-under win total heading into a season in 9 years. They're supposed to be terrible, but they do have a loaded backfield. That's for sure. Like, they can be without him and be okay.
Yeah, I agree. Tyler Algier, James Conner, I think he's on the mend from something medically. Trey Benson is in that backfield too.
Yeah.
So the Cardinals, I'm hoping they're feisty. You know what I mean? Like Mike LaFleur was probably the most underwhelming hire of the entire coaching cycle. We saw what he was with the New York Jets. It was a disaster with Zach Wilson. Him working with the Rams, it wasn't his offense. But, hey, I mean, I had fun watching that starting offense against the Raiders the other night. Jacoby Brissett made the best throw in Arizona Cardinals preseason history, a touchdown to Marvin Harrison Jr., who's another one of these players you're hoping for a breakout campaign from. So the Cardinals are not going to be winning the Super Bowl. I agree with you, but I would love to see them be feisty.
All right, let's go around the league a little bit. What ends up happening in Cleveland? Who's the starter in week 1 at quarterback?
Oh, my gosh. Did you watch that preseason week 1 against the Chicago Bears? I pray for your sanity you did not, because it was absolutely disgusting. Like, Deshaun Watson ran the offense okay. He was getting the ball out so late, though, and he wasn't exactly accurate. He still led the offense on 2 scoring drives, but it wasn't good. And at halftime of that game, you're saying, okay, Shedeur Sanders has a legitimate opportunity here to build some momentum for himself. And he started off pretty hot on his first drive. He had 2 completions of at least 25 yards. That's not something Deshaun Watson had in the first half. That drive ended up being a turnover on downs at the 5-yard line because the running back couldn't get across the sticks. But Shedeur Sanders only played 3 drives. The first one was successful. The second one, I think, was a 3-and-out. And on the third, he threw one of the most gross interceptions you've ever seen. So you walk away from that preseason week 1 saying, I'm underwhelmed. Like, it doesn't feel like the quarterback of the future for Cleveland is on roster right now. Deshaun Watson does not look good. Shedeur Sanders had an ugly turnover. Dylan Gabriel's not even in the conversation. So all that to say, like, there's a part of me that is really rooting for Shedeur Sanders. I think it would be much more of a fun storyline, but I can't confidently tell you, Kevin, that he's the best option the Browns have right now. I think it's telling that Deshaun Watson was the starter to begin preseason. I'm not saying that guarantees he's going to be the starter, but if Todd Monken is leaning that way and Shedeur Sanders can't make strides in the competition, I'm having a tough time putting money on Shedeur.
Is J.J. McCarthy the 3rd string quarterback behind Kyler Murray with Carson Wentz in between, or is he the backup?
He might be. Like, there's a lot of legs to this J.J. McCarthy story. You have to wonder how he's feeling, what his relationship is now with Kevin O'Connell. It's tough because Carson Wentz is definitely the solidified backup, or solidified veteran, I should say, in that room. And I thought he performed admirably in spots last year when he was called to come into the lineup. So, you know, if something happens with Kyler Murray and you're in the midst of a game at halftime, it's an interesting conversation that Kevin O'Connell is going to have with himself.
I mean, it's so hard to write off quarterbacks, you know, that are young. And we've seen this over and over again, but something stinks about this one. Like it was a quasi the GM in Minnesota. It was kind of his pick more than O'Connell's, and it just seems like they want to rid themselves of McCarthy and that would be amazing to do it this quickly.
Yeah, Kevin O'Connell famously said that organizations fail young quarterbacks before young quarterbacks fail organizations. And then he met J.J. McCarthy. You know, I think that O'Connell would accept some of the blame for not getting the most out of this young signal caller, but here's the other thing. I don't think McCarthy was his top choice as a quarterback prospect. I'm going to lay that at the feet of Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, who's put together some of the worst draft classes we've seen over the past few years. So J.J. McCarthy, you know, I don't think listen, I didn't like him as a prospect. I don't think he's the worst quarterback in the world. I still think that there is potential for him as, you know, maybe a long-time backup. He needs to be more accurate with the football, but you have to understand why the Vikings went with Kyler Murray. And here's the other part about this, not to dive into it too deep, but
I'm interested in the deep, because this is a mystery, I think, to just NFL fans in general as to why they've soured so quickly. Is it something about the intangible part of the game?
You know what it is, in my opinion, is that this Vikings team could be a legitimate sleeper in the NFL. We're talking about a defense that ranked number 3 last year, led by Brian Flores, arguably one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL. We're talking about having Justin Jefferson, who headlines what I think is one of the best supporting casts, with guys like Jordan Addison. Jawan Jennings is amazing. TJ Hawkinson at tight end, Jordan Mason and Aaron Jones in the backfield. The one thing that was holding Minnesota back last year was the play of the quarterback. And when that's your situation, you don't have time to sit around and try to develop this guy and hope that you reach your ceiling. The plan of attack is to go out there and get someone who can run a system and reach the potential and get that team to reach the potential of what they can be. That's what was tough about Minnesota was it was so clear that one position, and it was the most important one, was holding the team back. And that's what stinks about this situation. That's why the Vikings had to go out there and get someone else.
You know, all of the talk, remember, during the season last year, they should have kept Darnold, et cetera, et cetera. I said all last season, it's not like it was just their choice. Sam Darnold was an unrestricted free agent. He had a choice in the matter. And was he going to go somewhere where there was no young quarterback that was drafted in the first round or stay where there was? I'm not so sure he would have stayed in Minnesota had they come up with a comparable offer. So what about Vegas? How long before Mendoza?
Yeah, this is a fascinating conversation because I've always sided with Tom Brady on this, that young quarterbacks need to sit and develop and learn, and it really benefits them and whatnot. We've seen that with some of the biggest names in the game, such as Patrick Mahomes. But Doug Peterson, the former coach of the Jags and the Eagles, was on CBS Sports this offseason, and he was talking about this, and he brought up some really interesting points, saying that if you're 100% sold that this young quarterback is going to be the face of your franchise, like a Josh Allen, like a Fernando Mendoza, whatever it is, then it actually benefits you to play that guy immediately and get those learning or those growing pains out of the way quickly. And he said he actually told Sean McDermott this when he was the coach of the Buffalo Bills with Josh Allen. And remember, Doug Peterson did this himself. Back when he drafted Carson Wentz, they had Sam Bradford on roster. That was the initial plan, was to roll with Bradford, and they ended up trading him to, I think, Minnesota and rolling with Carson Wentz. So I think there's an argument to be made about starting Mendoza right away, but I would at least agree that he's going to benefit from learning behind a guy like Kirk Cousins. Now, it's an interesting question, when exactly is Mendoza going to be inserted into the starting lineup? I think if you ask the Raiders front office, their ideal situation is, hey, we are so competitive with Kirk Cousins that no one is calling for Mendoza to get into the game. But I don't think the Raiders are going to be some kind of sleeper in the NFL. So you have to wonder how many weeks is it going to take for the team to look at their rookie quarterback. And when it comes to stuff like this, I usually look at the bye week as a potential insertion point. I don't have the schedule up in front of me, but I think it's a relatively late bye for the Raiders. So I don't know. I wonder what the over-under is for how many games Kirk Cousins starts.
I actually don't think that roster's terrible. He apparently looks great. And it's going to be interesting because Mendoza apparently looks great as well. Jordan, thanks. Appreciate. Oh, I know. I had one other thing to ask you. So Jordan Tyson injured hamstring in New Orleans as their very high first round pick. There was a lot of discussion. We talked a lot about Jordan Tyson because Carnell Tate was a possibility had he dropped to 7 here in that draft. And there were people that wanted Tyson, but he was injured a lot in college and already injured and out for 2 months. That's a pretty big blow to a team that I think can actually compete for the NFC South.
Oh, 100%. I mean, if you were to ask me a sleeper team this year, the New Orleans Saints would probably be the first team off the top of my head. But
love him. Yeah.
Jordan Tyson, man, I'm not the best draft evaluator in the world, but I was absolutely frightened of Jordan Tyson. I just could not select him if I were the general manager of an NFL team in the top 10. In fact, I thought he was going to end up falling to, the bottom of the first round or so. But he had this weird pro day where teams attended that was late in the process, and he apparently shined there, which is why he went so high. But, I mean, we're talking about a guy who had a torn ACL, MCL, PCL in 2022, 2024 fractured his collarbone, had a sprained ankle in 2025, multiple hamstring issues in 2025. His name throughout the draft process kind of became synonymous with hamstring issues, in my opinion. And it's kind of funny that now a hamstring issue is going to knock him out for around 2 months. So Jordan Tyson is supremely talented. I understand why a lot of people had him as the top wide receiver in this draft class. But I was just absolutely scared to take him because of his injury history. And sure enough, he's not going to be ready for week 1.
Is there a player from this most recent draft where there's buzz around him already?
Like in terms of like a late round pick guy, because I can tell you
it can be a first
in,
round pick where people are saying, "Oh, it's so obvious already. We got it right." Like I was reading a lot about Ruben Bain last week. Apparently, he absolutely blew up the Jets in the joint practice. But is there somebody out there that already in NFL circles they're like, "This guy looks legit"? I mean, it's early. We understand that it's the preseason, it's training camp,
Right.
and their rookie year. But has anybody sort of said, "Yeah, we feel really good about it. We got it right"?
Well, I'll take you right down the road here in Nashville, Tennessee, with Carnell Tate at number 4 overall. I mean, he was not the most popular pick when he was selected by Titans fans and Titans journalists. And there were some guys who I work with that it took them one practice to kind of change their tune. Carnell Tate's been kind of destroying the Titans cornerbacks in training camp to the point where we're wondering if our investments at the cornerback position this offseason were even worth it, because this rookie's absolutely having his way with them. So Carnell Tate, as a prospect, he was not this guy who was viewed as a burner. You kind of wondered if he had that Jamar Chase ceiling. I don't know if that's going to be the case, but he's someone who has absolutely established himself as the wide receiver 1 for Cam Ward. He's winning in jump ball situations. He's getting open downfield. Carnell Tate is one of those guys that has really flashed early on throughout the process of the preseason.
I think there's a chance had he fallen to 7, that would have been Washington's pick.
Oh, yeah.
But he went 4th. Great to catch up. You're always great. Really appreciate it, Jordan. Take care.
Absolutely. Hey, Kevin, have you booked your flight to Vegas in November? Our schools are facing off in the Players Era Tournament, Maryland, Tennessee. Am I going to see you there? Bishop Boswell revenge game.
Wait. So you mean? Oh, that's right. Of course. Look, Rick Barnes is one of my favorite coaches, and this is a massive year for Buzz Williams. It sounds like a great weekend trip. I might be there.
Let's do it. I'll see you there. Thanks so much.
All right, Jordan Dejani, everybody from CBS Sports at Jordan Dejani on X. Yeah, Jordan Tyson out for 2 months. We talked about the concern. That is a position that over the years, when you're injured in college, you end up being injured in the pros. And he's going to miss the first 2 months of the season. The number 8 pick overall. Carnell Tate obviously went 4th, so it sounds like the Titans see a guy that it was worthwhile to draft it for. Of course, none of this matters until you see him in actual games. Can't wait till we get that started. Some other sports news that I wanted to get to, including this fascinating Lakers situation with their sale, which was the largest ever last week. It may be held up by one of the Buss family members. That's next. So late last week, the story broke that the Lakers were being sold for a record $12.5 billion, the most ever paid for a sports franchise in North America, exceeding what the Seattle Seahawks had been purchased for and what the Lakers had been purchased for a year earlier in June of 2025, which was $10 billion. Josh Kushner and Bob Iger were the buyers at a $12.5 billion agreed price. Mark Walter, who purchased a 70+% stake in the Lakers back in June of 2025, was selling his shares. And the thought was that the other big chunk of stock in the Lakers, a 17.8% stake, which the Buss family still owned, would go along with Mark Walter, and they would sell their shares as well at the same valuation at $12.5 billion. But it's not working out that way. It's a very interesting situation. So Jeannie Buss, who is the smartest of the Buss children and the one that's been most involved. Jerry Buss had 6 kids: Jim, Johnny, Janie, Joey, Jesse, and, of course, Jeannie. Jeannie was, if you ever watched that Lakers special on HBO, Jeannie, as a very young woman, was involved with the business with her father, and she was really bright, really smart, innovative, the whole thing. And she's been the most associated with running the Lakers for years since her father stepped down and then eventually passed away. Jeannie disagrees with her 5 siblings. She doesn't want to sell the 17.8% stake. And something that is really interesting about the sale last year is that Mark Walter paid $10 billion for the Lakers, but he allowed Jeannie Buss to continue to be the controlling owner, even though she and her siblings only had 17.8% of the stake. She was named controlling owner until 2030. Now, as part of this purchase with Iger and with Kushner, they apparently are okay in living up to the Walter promise to Jeannie Buss that she remain the controlling owner through 2030. But that's only if the Busses still have a stake in the Lakers. And her 5 siblings, they want to sell. But that's where the battle is right now. Can they sell with 5 of the 6 voting yes at the $12.5 billion value, their 17.8% stake? Jeannie Buss's lawyer basically said that they're contending a court ruling in 2017 that said no sale could be effectuated without approval by the co-trustees. And the co-trustees, there are 3 of them: Jeannie, Janie, and Joey. 3 of the 6 are the co-trustees. And at this point, they have one of their trustees, Jeannie Buss, holding out. So the $12.5 billion sale, at least for the entirety of the organization, is still up for grabs. And whether or not Iger and Kushner, the new owners, would agree to let Jeannie remain as the controlling owner if the Busses don't sell their stake seems to be tenuous, even though the reports are that they said that they would honor the former owner, Mark Walter's, promise to her that she could run the team and be the controlling owner through 2030. So it's messy out in Los Angeles. There's always been something about Jeannie Buss that's been interesting. You can tell she's smart. You can tell she is an absolute badass in business. And it doesn't seem like, based on the various things that have been written about that family, that any of her siblings have anywhere near the intellect or the intuition that she has. Still, at $12.5 billion, how old's Jeannie Buss now? She's got to be in her 60s, right? Maybe even older than that. At a $12.5 billion, what is she?
64.
She's 64. At 12.5 billion, a nice little 17% stake, and then her share of whatever the 17.8% is wouldn't be too bad. But I don't think she's hurting for money. That is one interesting NBA situation. The other is the situation involving the other team in Los Angeles, the Clippers. I don't know how much you guys have followed the story that Pablo Torre from ESPN, or used to be with ESPN. I don't know who he's with now.
Independent, I believe.
Okay. He did an investigative piece several months ago that found that Clippers owner Steve Ballmer essentially was funneling money through through a couple of companies, one in particular to Kawhi Leonard, which was circumventing the salary cap. That would be a major penalty against the Clippers. The NBA's been investigating this, and yesterday it was reported that the NBA found no evidence that Clippers owner Steve Ballmer actually funneled money through team sponsors to pay Kawhi Leonard in order to circumvent the salary cap. But it's not over. The NBA is still investigating, and now they are focused on whether the team and Ballmer simply introducing Kawhi Leonard, and by the way, his uncle, who handles all of Kawhi Leonard's business dealings, if just introducing Kawhi Leonard to some of these sponsors is a violation of the league's rules prohibiting salary cap circumvention. I've read a little bit about this because I'm interested in it. Kawhi Leonard's one of my favorite players. Remember, he got traded, but the trade is now on hold to the Toronto Raptors for, 2 players and a bunch of draft picks. He's going back to Toronto. But the deal is on hold until they find out whether or not the introduction of Kawhi and his uncle to these sponsors, which may have allowed Leonard to benefit from those relationships financially, if that violates the league's policy. And in reading about this, it is not unusual when star players are introduced to big sponsors. So I find it difficult to think that the NBA is going to find that the team violated the salary cap circumvention rules by just merely introducing Kawhi Leonard to these sponsors. Now, whether or not Kawhi Leonard could be in trouble, I don't know. But it's an 11th month investigation now that is ongoing, and the trade to the Raptors has been held up. They're going to have to certainly release that trade or scratch it before these teams go to camp. Toronto seems to be fine with letting this play out. They want the trade to go through. But interesting NBA news yesterday from LA on both of the teams. All right. I want everybody to know that all of our sports and training camp and even NBA conversation on the Team 980 presented by Xfinity. Score the most reliable Wi-Fi. One price, 5 years, guaranteed. Xfinity. Imagine that. Nielsen, the rating service, did a deep dive study to determine which NFL fan bases are the most passionate. More on that next. We've got a guest coming up at 12. We've got a few minutes here. I'm going to save the conversation about the study that was conducted by Nielsen that created basically a metric or a series of metrics to measure which NFL fan base has the most passionate fans in their local markets. We'll get to that at about 12:25 because we do have a guest coming up. Roger Goodell did a recent interview with a German media outlet. And he was asked about, will an NFL team exist outside of the USA? And he said, quote, I have no doubt that this will happen one day, closed quote. He also talked about multiple cities outside of the U.S. being capable of hosting a Super Bowl, even if outside of the country didn't have an NFL team. Man, I feel like Roger Goodell has been talking about a team in London, a team in Berlin, but definitely in London for 10 years. This time every year, or maybe it's a Super Bowl every year, it's always mentioned. The logistics of having a team in Europe won't be easy. I think it will happen one day. The NFL is just growing exponentially in popularity. When you're over there, the NFL is popular in London. It's popular in Germany for sure. It's popular in Spain. It is becoming more popular in France. Not necessarily a big deal in Italy. At this point, the NBA is massive in Italy, as it is throughout Europe. The NBA is right now, I guess somebody might say cricket is the second most popular global sport to soccer. But I think just the NBA specifically is probably close to if cricket's number 2, the NBA would be 3. But I can see, certainly a team being based in London, a team being based in Berlin, a team being based in Madrid. But I think I would see a team based in Mexico City even before that. Something a little bit closer. Remember, the NFL is playing 10 international games starting in 2027, which will be the most. There are 9 this year. Our team playing in one of those, week 4, in London against the Indianapolis Colts, who, by the way, signed Keenan Allen yesterday. Keenan Allen's been hanging out there for a while. I thought there was a decent chance he'd end up back in L.A. with the Chargers, but there are some injuries and, no Pittman anymore in Indy, so they signed Keenan Allen to be a receiver with the Indianapolis Colts. All right, up next, we're going to go down to Baton Rouge, talk to someone down there who's been covering LSU football for 30 years. We'll talk about the Jaden Daniels situation for sure. Also find out what kind of team Lane Kiffin's going to have. The rankings came out yesterday. LSU was 11th preseason. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. Talked a lot about Jaden Daniels and the LSU situation. At the same time, yesterday, the AP came out with its preseason top 25. LSU ranked 11th. They open up with Clemson Labor Day Saturday night. That game is in Death Valley, and Clemson's not ranked. But, Dabo's doing that little Clemson thing. We're just little Clemson, and everybody down there thinks they're going to be a sleeper team in the ACC. I've been to Death Valley at night. There's nothing like it in sports. Trust me. Joining me right now, Mike Scarborough. He's covered LSU football for 30 years for tigerbait.com. You can follow Mike on X at Scarborough Mike. I called you and we reached out to you to talk about this Jaden Daniels thing, but you've probably been to a bunch of sporting events. I've been to a bunch of sporting events. I went to, I think it was 2016. I went to Bama LSU in Death Valley at night. It was Fournette's freshman year. I remember that. It's a top 3 sporting event easily that I've ever been to. You get to see it year in and year out. Do you realize just how lucky you are to be in one of the most incredible environments sports can produce?
Yes. And it's one of those things where we also pay attention nationally, and when LSU schedules these marquee non-conference games, which now are at risk because LSU's AD is saying until the CFP gets the strength of schedule right, these games like Clemson and Oregon's and all the Texases and before they join the league, that those games are going to go bye-bye. But LSU fans certainly travel around the SEC, and then when you go to other venues, you already are predisposed to LSU, but when you go elsewhere, you realize how special even further. I remember when a bunch of fans went to Notre Dame, and they were so let down by LSU played Wisconsin at Lambeau,
right,
and how those venues were just a complete letdown for what they're used to at home and a few other places in the SEC.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the SEC, I'm going to guess that week 3 at Ole Miss is going to be one of the more anticipated regular season games in a long time. You got to get by Clemson. I'm assuming you're a sizable favorite against an unranked Clemson team. But what's that Ole Miss game in week 3? How much of the conversation is about Lane Kiffin's return?
Well, yeah, LSU's last I saw 12.5-point favorite over Clemson.
Yeah.
Ole Miss is a 2.5-point favorite over LSU. I think the thought is that with Chambliss and what they have returning in the home crowd and the fever pitch that's going to be that going to be for everybody a tough ticket. I haven't looked at StubHub lately, but the thing about LSU and Lane Kiffin is if LSU, the expectations are playoffs, you can ill afford to come out of September with more than one loss. And so the feeling is that this is the year that Ole Miss should beat LSU or have their best chance. But if they don't do it this year, they're not going to in the future. And so, but the worst thing for LSU is don't lose that game in Oxford and it be such an emotional game and then come back to Tiger Stadium when you got A&M, who's a very physical football team. And I think one of the sleepers in the league. Don't compound that by having another loss to A&M the following week, and then come out of September with 2 losses. I don't know how you make the playoffs if you're behind the 8 ball like that, particularly when you look at that November schedule for LSU.
All right. The reason for reaching out to you, I'm sure you know, is just the last 5 days. So what you've covered the LSU football for 30 years. Jaden was an incredible Heisman Trophy winning player. I've talked so much about that team. If it had just a bad defense instead of a horrific defense, they probably would have been in the playoff and had a chance. But just give me, your personal perspective on what's happened here the last few days.
It's so very unfortunate, and you're right. I always said during those Daniel years, if they just would have had an average defense his last year, they could have been a national champion. Yeah. But he's a fantastic kid. always gracious, always great in interviews. I've got a little bit of a feeling for what the dynamics are behind the scenes and some off the record conversations that we've had with his camp. The overriding thought for me is that Jaden Daniels is knee deep in preparing with his football team and in constant meetings and workouts and practices. And I don't think he's been behind the scenes worrying about this too much. It's somebody else on his behalf. I think you know who that is.
Yeah.
And
of course, it's the mother. We've had 2 years of it. You guys had 2 years of it, and everybody understands that this was the family and most likely the mother. I want go ahead, continue. I don't want to inject anything until I hear you.
There's a former LSU staffer that's kind of behind the scenes as well, and close to Jaden and his mom. And I think that's where some of it's going out. And I know several media friends of mine were talking to that individual. That was festering for a week or a few weeks before it broke. Phone calls being made. What are they doing? So I'm kind of wondering how much of that was stirring the pot and getting her riled up or whatever. I just wonder at some point. First of all, I hate it for Jaden. That he should have no speed bumps or anything in front of him that causes him any issues with the LSU fan base. If the Commanders have an open date, he's the guy that you want to come here on that Saturday because they're not playing that weekend, and he's being acknowledged between quarters and waving to a crowd to a standing ovation. To me, it's criminal what has been done to him. Again, I don't think it's him. I just wonder. We're all raised differently. We all have different dynamics. Whether you come from divorced parents or whatever, but at some point,
he's got to be the adult.
So at some point, you need to do the Michael Jackson thing and separate from the parent.
Yeah. Not separate from the mother, but separate from the mother being overly involved in creating more problems than she's solving.
Yes. He's got to live with this. That's his legacy. I don't know what his the end result of his full NFL career is going to be. I hope it's for him multiple Super Bowls and so forth. But one of the great things about being a former player at a school like LSU and many others is all the years is your graying to be able to go back, once a year or whenever and enjoy that time. And I don't want anything less than that for him. And so I'm actually kind of shocked by, the first 24 hours or 36, 48 hours of that last week. I couldn't tell who was getting the worst of it, whether it was LSU or him. But by the weekend, it's all been on him.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, well, what is the solution? It's almost like the solution is either the mom comes out and throws herself under the bus or Jaden throws her under the bus. Right?
Yeah. One of the.
I hadn't. And is the mom capable of saying this was all my doing? Jaden had nothing to do with it. Please, I don't know what the way to do it is, but guys like him and his stature have crisis management people and PR firms. They need to get one. They don't need to just be winging it because it looks bad for him. I'm sure it's absolutely hurt his value tremendously. With potential sponsors and everything else.
Yeah, the perspective, obviously we have different perspectives because he's going to play for us in a month in a regular season game, and it's a massive, crucial season for him. And he can make all of this a non-issue by going out playing well and leading the team to wins. He's never going to play at LSU again. So the legacy is what took a hit. And to your point, like, I don't know what the solution is, but I know that the lesson better have been learned, because if nothing is learned, then another big self-inflicted mistake and distraction is just around the corner. Because remember, she's his agent as well. And what you said about this, I've said it too, that the part that saddens me, because I love Jaden Daniels. I loved him in college. Everything that he's been here has been first rate. This is it, by the way, he's an introvert too, naturally.
Oh,
So this could not have been an easy, 24 to 48 hours, but he'll get through it. He'll get over it. The part that upsets me is that what you described, being in that bye weekend on the sideline with, Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase watching a big game and being welcomed back. And I think from this seat, it's a recoverable relationship. But I've read that a lot of LSU people believe that it isn't. What do you say?
I tell you what, I do a lot of shows. I host my own shows. And look, I think a lot of people are having fun with the memes. Look, Billy Cannon, the number 20 that's retired, that number, Heisman Trophy winner, he was he did prison time for counterfeiting money.
Right.
All right, it took time for that to get smoothed over and for fans to forgive him. And in his later years, it was all good. Jane Daniels in this thing is nothing compared to that. I think eventually this will blow over. And I think the LSU fans, particularly those that pay attention, know exactly or feel like you and I do. They're not blaming it on
it's not him,
on Jaden at all. They saw all the interviews that we did with him, which he didn't do many because, like you said, he's an introvert, but he's a quiet guy. I just don't see in him being anything about him is that prima donna thing, which is why everybody is pointing the finger at his mom.
Yes. I mean, if you're paying attention, you understand that. But this thing went, so viral and so pop culture. And most of those people don't. And so their opinion is what their opinion is. But it really matters to me. I mean, here again, he's going to play. That's what we're focused in on, is him being focused in on a critical season. And he's going to play a game on September 13th that'll matter against the Eagles on the road. And if he plays well, it doesn't matter. But that LSU relationship, I hope, gets repaired. And again, it's about, is she and those around that situation, are they capable of understanding how much damage they did, and then reconciling that with a solution that is, maybe we need to take a major step back and let him be a professional football and an adult.
And my question is the attorney that, put the cease and desist letter together.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall during that meeting. Did that attorney try and say, are you sure you want to do this? I mean, let's really talk about what the ramifications are for this, or what are the possible outcomes? I mean, did they really, work this from all angles and bring in other staffers from the inside the building and say, what could go wrong here? It's not hard to figure out what could go wrong, and it did.
Yeah, I mean, this would have been the easiest with anybody that pays attention to this kind of thing to say, no, that's a terrible idea. And enumerate the reasons. I actually think, reaching out to ESPN and giving them the whole story was just as bad as the cease and desist letter. None of it was very bright, and hopefully they learn from it. But to your point, and I think a lot of our fans understand the same thing, this more likely than not wasn't him. He's focused on the season. He's focused on football. He is a gym rat. Everybody says that about him when it comes to football. And, he's just got to probably be the one that prevents anything like this happening again in the future.
Yeah. And when does that happen? I mean, does he all of a sudden, when his NFL career's over, realize the trail of of disasters they're waiting for him to clean up once his playing days are over. And this is, kind of the mess that my mom has made for me along the way. Again, we're all brought up different. I know the way me and my friends would have reacted had our mom inserted herself in these types of things when we're in our mid-20s. And I think we would have been very nice because it is our mothers, but it would essentially would have been Pound Sand.
Yeah, look, that's a dynamic I can't guess on. It's his mother, and by the way, she's bright, but she's been involved and overly involved going back to Arizona State, and it's led to negative outcomes when it's been that hyper over controlling parent getting far too much involved, not as an agent, but as a parent.
Everybody remembers the clip of him in a basketball game and her getting between him and the girl.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's all that. I mean, where does that kind of stuff end?
Hopefully,
does he finally snap at like 31 or 32, and then their relationship? At some point later in life, is there an animosity built up between the two of them because of the wreckage?
Yeah, I don't know. I can tell you this: what's obviously apparent is she's enjoying the celebrity of it. And that's part of the problem too, combining the enjoyment of being a big part of the Netflix special. I mean, she's at camp. She's being mobbed for autographs and pictures. The mother of the quarterback is. Hopefully this was.
Meanwhile, who is the quiet one? His father.
Yeah.
Do you even know his father's name?
Don't have no idea.
Exactly.
Is that your point?
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
And by the way, that tells me that that's probably who Jaden is most like.
Right. Well, we can do psychological, family analyses on this show, but you've told me what's going on down there, and it really sounds like the LSU fan base at some point, they recognize that this isn't him. And by the way, we didn't even talk about the actual cease and desist and the number controversy. It certainly seems from afar, Mike, like most LSU fans are like, look, DJ Pickett's really good. He's wearing number 5.
Yeah, and don't forget, there's also a dynamic here where LSU went, 70 years between Heisman Trophy winners, and then they got 2 of 3.
Yeah.
And don't discount how close him and Joe Burrow's Heisman trophies came about, and probably the Daniels camp always comparing, how much one is revered over the other, or however they want to perceive it, and spinning that conspiracy amongst themselves. I think there's a whole lot of that going on too.
Well, there is, and I'm curious. Do you come down on the side of, let's just say DJ Pickett said, "I want number 9"? Would they have given him number 9? Would Brian Kelly have committed to that?
I bring it up I've been brought up in the last few weeks several times. Bryce Underwood, Michigan quarterback, was committed to LSU for almost 2 years, and he was a 5-star quarterback, number 1 quarterback in that high school class. And let's say he had worn the number 9 since elementary school. I bet you Joe Burrow would have gotten a phone call and said, "Man, go ahead and wear number 9."
Right.
I guarantee. I know that's how it would have been handled.
Yeah.
Or maybe Bryce Underwood would have said, "You know what? I've worn 9 forever. Maybe I don't want to wear 9 at LSU." And who knows what the dynamic would be, but. I just don't see Joe Burrow concerning himself with that. I honestly don't. Both he and Jaden Daniels are going to get statues at LSU under the rules and the criteria for it back to back at some point in the future, regardless of all this stuff happening right now. But again, it kind of the story really died down here. I mean, we lost the beloved Skip Bertman on Friday, and football season is full speed ahead. But the memes are still out there, and people are still having fun on Facebook and Instagram and so forth with it. But for Jaden, I want it repaired because I don't want. I want him to have the full benefits of the special 2 years he had at LSU and the Heisman Trophy and that to me that's
no. I'm with you, and I think that because we've gotten to know him a little bit here, you guys had him for 2 years as well. He's so naturally likable that he's highly respected, and to see him be a national punching bag for 4 straight days was painful. It was hard, especially knowing that it wasn't him. Yes.
I don't know how, whether it was post-game interviews or whatever, that anybody that walked away from him just didn't walk away saying that kid was a total sweetheart. I mean, because he just is.
Well, hopefully he goes out and torches the Eagles on September 13th and has a season like he had 2 seasons ago. I'm expecting it. Mike, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Anytime. And I hope he all the success in the world, too, and he bounces back and has a great year.
I think he will. Thanks. Mike Scarborough, everybody, from TigerBait.com. He's been covering LSU sports and the football team for 3 decades. All right. I promised you we would get to this Nielsen study that identified the most passionate NFL fan base in its own local market. That's next. I will get to, at the very end of the show today, the report that C.J. Abrams not thrilled moving from shortstop to second base. Talk about that at the end of the show. So I saw this yesterday after the show. Nielsen, the ratings service and surveyor, released its first ever NFL fandom index, which ranks how passionate NFL fans are in each team market based on key metrics. So there are 30 markets, not 32, because it is a market ranking about how passionate the fans are for the NFL and the team in that market. San Francisco, Oakland, the Bay Area has obviously two teams, as does New York. So it's out of 30 spots in 30 markets that are ranked in terms of NFL fandom. The metrics used are things like apparel purchases, event attendance, linear TV viewership, streaming viewership, radio listening, betting intent, social media following, and general interest. Now, again, first ever NFL fandom index ranking how passionate NFL fans are in each of these markets. So not every market do you have just fans of the team that plays in that market. Our market has a lot of fans of other teams, especially after 25 years of Snyder. We had a lot of, people jump to the Ravens. The Cowboy fans felt chestier than ever to come out from wherever they were hiding for all of those years. But where did Washington rank? I'll tell you in a moment. Now, let me mention that the rankings are based on those 8 metrics. And what you're going to see, and it's not surprising, is that smaller markets end up outperforming bigger markets, in part because some of these smaller markets, the NFL is all they have, or it's just one of 2 teams. So number 1 overall in the fandom index, ranking how passionate NFL fans are in these markets, Buffalo. That doesn't surprise anybody, but it's a small market. Number 2 is Kansas City. Doesn't surprise anybody that the fans are considered to be as passionate as anywhere in the league, but it's a smaller market. Green Bay is 3rd on this list. 4th is a stunner to me, Cincinnati. And 5th is Philadelphia. Now, because this is the first ever fandom index, we don't have comps. We don't have what it was last year. We don't have what it was 5 years ago. We don't have what it was 20 years ago. I can tell you this, from a linear TV viewership standpoint, probably from an event attendance in terms of, if that's not necessarily the overall gross number, but the percentage of capacity, things like apparel purchases, et cetera. Washington 20 years ago, in 2006, would have been very high on this list. Very high. Even though it is a bigger market, it is still a market dominated by one team and dominated by one product, the NFL. Back 20 years ago, Washington's been the only team that has exceeded the Cowboys as the number 1 overall revenue team in the NFL. That happened early in the Snyder tenure, when essentially he was extracting revenue from every corner of every, section at FedEx Field and beyond. But at that time, 20 years ago, and you go back 30 years ago, when you didn't have necessarily social media following or streaming as a metric, but you had event attendance or linear TV viewership, Washington would have been in the top 3 or 4. Even if it was about, actual size of the or the actual attendance numbers, the higher the better, rather than just a percentage of capacity. Washington back then had the biggest stadium in the NFL, had the highest capacity in the NFL. Its local television ratings were as high as any market in the league consistently. So 20 years ago, Washington would have ranked very high on this list. Buffalo, Kansas City, Green Bay, Cincinnati, and Philly were the top 5. Cincinnati's surprising to me. I know that in recent years, and they love the Bengals, don't get me wrong. They love the Bengals, and the Bengals have been successful since drafting Joe Burrow. They've been a competitive team. And look, Ohio is all about football. You know, whether it's Cleveland, Cincinnati, Columbus, it doesn't matter. Football is king in Ohio. The next 5 rounding out the top 10 were Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Detroit, New Orleans, and Cleveland. There was one market missing from the top 10 that I would have guessed would have been in the top 10, and another one that would have been very close, and neither one was. New Orleans being in the top 10 is not surprising. The NFL and college football, but just football in general, is number one, and the Saints are massive. Even when the Saints weren't that great, they would get incredibly large local television numbers. The 2 markets that I thought would have been in the top 10, one for sure is Denver. Denver is a football-first town, not even close, and the Broncos, even when they're not great, get great reception in that market. And Seattle, you know, I would have thought would have been close to the top 10. Denver came in at 12. Seattle came in at 14. And then started the run of the bigger markets. Yes, you had Philly in the top 10. You know, you had Detroit in the top 10. But the big markets that have multiple teams and multiple interests in various sports, that run started at 18 with Houston, 19 with Dallas, 20 with Chicago, and then tied for 21st, Boston and Washington. And then the markets that followed, Atlanta's not, you know, a number one NFL market. Phoenix isn't necessarily. Tampa probably is, but it's Florida. The Bay Area, you know, they're into everything in the Bay Area, although I'm not going to tell you that the 49ers aren't number one. I think most Bay Area residents would say the Niners are number one. But there's competition, whereas in this market, there's not as much competition as there are in other markets. Miami was 28, Los Angeles 29, and New York was 30. Look, football in New York, the Giants and the Jets, behind the Yankees, behind the Knicks for sure now. But Washington came in at 21. It's not surprising to me that Washington's that low on this list. The damage over a quarter century. You know, I go back to probably 2018, 2019. I remember sharing this with all of you. I was told that essentially 2/3, roughly, they had done the math internally, and that 2/3 of their hardcore fan base had evaporated. It was gone. A third of it was left, and the highest revenue generating portion of their fan base was among the 2/3 that left, which is why Snyder was in, you know, not in dire trouble, because he's an NFL team and they get 1/32 of the media revenue. But in terms of their, you know, overall profit and loss statement, their balance sheet didn't look like it did 20 years earlier or even 10 years earlier. I mean, it's why some of the things started to happen with his minority shareholders, which led to obviously the shareholders getting upset because they felt they were being lied to, and that led to Fred Smith calling for the team name, etc. We know the story. But 21st is not surprising to me. I know that in our bubble of conversations about the football team, it feels like it would be much higher on the list in terms of passionate fans, but it's not. It used to be. It's not. The question is, can it become again? I think the answer is yes. It certainly can climb. The football team is still number one in this market by a long shot. there is pent-up demand. The name was obviously impactful in 2020 and beyond. The new name and the new, stuff that came with it was impactful. I do think that this ownership group, and I think Mark Klaus, the team president, they're slowly drifting back to the look, the feel of what the team used to be. I don't think they can go all the way, which would be to bring back the old name. But I think the old logo's not out of consideration down the road. But the bottom line now, because many of those 2/3 that evaporated, some of those people have come back, but clearly not all of them. It's going to be about marketing to a younger audience, and they recognize that. And to do that effectively, it a star player like Jaden Daniels, it's winning for sure. And there are a lot of other things that have to be done to reach those people in the way in which they want their annual spend rate on the team to get to whatever that level is. 21st, certainly over the next 5 years, and with a new stadium opening and with a younger fan base, it's skewing younger, where things like the name aren't nearly as important. Yeah, there's still pent-up demand for a big-time football team in our market. So 5 years from now, I could see this, certainly the team being in the top half of the league. Winning, everybody says winning has to happen. Well, winning did happen in 2024, and they're still a long way away from where they used to be. Last year, a bit of a step back. Understood. Hopefully they stay healthy this year. All right. Dan Quinn spoke this morning before practice, let you know what happened at practice, who was there, who wasn't. And a trending story right now, C.J. Abrams, it's being reported, he's not happy about the Nats moving him from shortstop to second base. We'll get to that and more. Next, Kevin Sheehan show you're listening to on the Team 980, and you can stream the show and listen to it at the stream at the team980.com. And if you listen to the podcast of this show, rate and review the show. Apple and Spotify give you a chance to give us up to 5 stars if you think the show deserves it. You can write a quick review on Apple and follow the show as well. Hit the plus button or the follow button, specifically on Apple and Spotify. We know a lot of you listen to the podcast version of this radio show. Just rate it and review it if you get a chance. It helps us a lot. Practice today was full pads. Also included Drew Stevens being the only kicker. 6 for 6 he was on kicks, including a 60-yarder that hit the crossbar and went over. Ben reported that it was a low snap. Nice job by Tressway handling the low snap. Dorrance Armstrong was out there rotating with the ones. And what else did we have? Nick Allegretti was back, said he's on a pitch count for now in his return to practice. But as far as ready to play, he said he is ready to go. They got to get Allegretti, geared up for the opener. We played a little bit of Dan Quinn's sound from earlier in the show, and if you missed it, I'll play what he said about the kicking competition and about Jaden and the preseason games. But this was Quinn earlier this morning talking about the two running backs, Katron Allen and Robert Henry Jr., from their performance Friday night against the Dolphins.
And what have you seen from the two rookies beyond the preseason game, Katron and Robert?
Yep. Yeah, I like a number of things. Like, they're different in terms of play style, but they're both eager in terms of how they want to do things. Can they make an impact on special teams? So seeing Rob on the return side, seeing Katron as a lead blocker and the kickoff return side, I thought they've made an improvement in pass protection. So that's the stuff. And although Katron had a drop, I thought, in the game, like, he's got really good hands. He's demonstrated both of them can catch. And so that's a big deal because now they're well-rounded guys. They've got pass protection down. They both got good hands coming out of the backfield. And so there's more reps and get him a chance to go do it.
Yeah, he did drop a pass, but that was not an issue for him at Penn State. Robert Henry Jr., we talked about his performance on the show yesterday. It's very clear, given the number of touches he got, as a running back, 12 carries for 75 yards. And then the fact that they had him both on kickoff and on punt returns. There was a sense that this guy he's got something, and we got to see if he can do it on special teams as well. They put Jerome Ford on the injured list. Right now, Jeremy McNichols is banged up and on the injured list. They signed Craig Reynolds from Detroit. I guess there's a possibility that the four backs on opening day could be Bill Krosky-Merritt, Rashad White, Katron Allen, and Robert Henry Jr., with Robert Henry Jr. potentially being a guy that starts on kickoff returns. If they'd have four backs active on game day, that seems like a bit of a reach. But Ford really, I thought, as much as you can, get anything out of a preseason environment, it was very clear he's a very natural zone runner. He's patient. He's got excellent vision. He's got burst. He's got really good feet. He's got a really good cut and then followed with a burst once he sees it. And I think Katron Allen, I liked him at Penn State, and this is one preseason game. I'm surprised that there's no way any back in the league got 23 carries in the preseason. Did Katron Allen lead the league in carries over the weekend? That may be a hard thing to do without going box score by box score. But 23 carries in a preseason game is insane. Why did he get all those carries? They wanted to see something from him too. I don't know if this is a battle for a spot on the team, but I certainly wouldn't be beholden to a 6th round pick if I thought that the undrafted player was better. I mean, we're not talking about protecting a 2nd or a 3rd rounder. Katron Allen was picked in the 6th round. I like Allen, though. And they're seeing these guys every day in practice. But the fact that Henry got that, opportunity, got 12 carries, and then got the kick and punt returns that he got, tells you that they wanted to see this guy under the lights to see if he could do it, in a game atmosphere. And, the other part of that is with all of the different guys back there on kickoff returns, and it's not like they had a bunch. Jerome Ford was back on one. Henry was back on another. The Dolphins only scored once on the opening drive and then had the kickoff to start the second half. But you wonder if they're also looking because there's a plan maybe to move on from McCaffrey. This was Quinn talking about that early defense against Miami and what he wants to do to correct it.
I know you guys weren't happy with the first defensive drive from the preseason game.
Correct.
What did you see from that? What do you want to correct this week?
I just didn't love kind of the urgency that we played with. Just wasn't like as downhill and aggressive that I saw from the practice. And so I wanted to see more of that. So, third downs, obviously, allowed a conversion. So it just didn't feel as, violent and as strong as I'd like to see, from the unit overall. And then offensively, I didn't love the way we started the second half. We had a real chance to do some things. We scored, got to stop, then having the ball to go back, man, could have went up big into that space and had to punt. So those are, 2 points of emphasis for sure, starting both halves, being aggressive.
If you missed what he said about the kickers, we played it right at the beginning of the show, but Drew Stevens is their guy. Jake Moody was released. Here's what he said about the competition here in training camp being won by Drew Stevens.
You guys released Jake Moody.
Yeah.
I don't know if that definitively means Drew Stevens is the kicker, but what about Drew Stevens has impressed you this camp?
Yeah, and I thought this was a good competition all the way back from the spring when we had here. We kicked just about every day from the spring and 2 out of 3 days in these blocks for training camp. And both guys, I thought, have had, productive days. But I thought Drew established himself, thought he's kicking it, pure and clean. And so it is important for him to have the next 2 games where he gets all the kicks, all the moments. And so it was just a good competition. I thought, earned it. And so we're moving forward.
Love to see on Saturday, a 4th and 7, 4th and 8 at the Detroit 47-yard line. I'd love to see him trot out Stevens for a 64-yarder. Why not? Indoors, preseason, doesn't matter. Let's just see the leg. Or maybe they're hiding it, but I don't think they can hide Drew Stevens. Everybody knows he had a big leg coming out. There will be a lot of pressure on Drew Stevens when we get to the 13th, and it does appear, based on what I've heard, that this is their move. Unless he completely soils himself in these final 2 preseason games, or God forbid gets injured, he's going to be the kicker on opening day in Philadelphia. This was Quinn, and we played this and talked about it earlier. But if you missed it, he was asked about Jaden playing in the preseason.
What you've seen with Jaden Daniels, would you be comfortable if he plays 0 preseason snaps?
Yes. I'd be comfortable with him and other veterans that have played to go. But we haven't decided in terms of will we or won't we. We had a joint last week. He got a lot of reps. He'll get a lot today and tomorrow going against our defense. So I'll have a better sense for where everybody is before we make any of those decisions. But he's thrown an incredible training camp. His accuracy, his command of it, a new system. You wouldn't feel like that for him. But I've been certainly impressed by what I've seen so far by him.
Certainly seems to be leading towards Jaden Daniels not playing in the preseason, and maybe other veteran starters as well. Rome writes, DQ will get them in that space to go. That's how he gets down. Everybody getting ops. Yeah, sounds just like Dan Quinn. Thank you, Rome, for that. C.J. Abrams' agent, Mike Sanders of Rock Nation Sports, told The Athletic that his client believes himself to be a shortstop, short-term and long-term, and that I don't think we have a full evaluation yet of how good he can truly be there, closed quote. He also said that C.J. Abrams is, quote, not thrilled, close quote, about moving from shortstop to second base, something that the Nats talked about last week. And they said that it wasn't necessarily his favorite thing to do, but that he's going to do what's best for the team right now. But that's certainly going to be an issue when we get to the offseason. C.J. Abrams moving from shortstop, where he's not been very good defensively, but he has been unbelievable offensively, to second base. All right, that'll do it for today. Chris is up next.